Jesus does not want to be known as a magical healer who came into the world to kind of let strange magical powers ooze out from him this way and that. Jesus came to meet people one-on-one and help them one-on-one.
Hi, I'm your host, Dan Kruver. Does Jesus feel bothered when you come to him for help? In this episode of Light and Truth, John Piper opens Luke 8, verses 40 to 56 to show Christ's deep compassion for those who fear they've come too late or asked too much. This teaching was originally delivered at Bethlehem Baptist Church on March 28, 1982.
Turn with me to Luke chapter 8, verse 40 to 56, and we'll look at these two stories together. What we're doing tonight is completing our study of a unit of 4 miracle stories that are sandwiched between a section on the Word of God and the sending out of the 12 on their mission. And what they are designed to do by being grouped together, we've seen, is to show Jesus powerful over nature, over the supernatural realm of demons and Satan, over sickness and over death. All the things that would threaten to make our mission fruitless or our lives meaningless or fruitless, Jesus is shown here to be conqueror of. And therefore, these stories are designed for our great encouragement. And so we want to look at these two tonight, which are kind of like a sandwich for that kind of encouragement for our week ahead. Now, what I'd like to do is follow through Jairus to the end and then come back and pick up the healing of the woman who had the flow of blood. First thing I want us to notice is in verses 40 to 42, or really it's just in 41 and 42, how Luke brought out the need of this man and the compassion of Jesus. Luke highlights again and again Jesus' tender-heartedness when he encounters need. What are the 3 things here that show this man Jairus in great need? What heightens the need? This little word only, that's only in Luke. And you remember back when he raised the widow's son at Nain in chapter 7, verse 12, it was the widow and her only son. None of the other gospel writers take pains to point that out for us. She was only 12. That's an interesting correlation to this woman who had this flow of blood for 12 years. 12 years of life was about to be snuffed out. 12 years of sickness were about to be healed. And she was dying. Those 3 things make this man's plight very, very clear and show that Jesus simply heads out. No statement about questions of what's her condition, what's your faith. Just, he's gone. And I thought a lot about things, about how Jesus was continually interrupted in his ministry and seemed to just kind of flow with the needs. Do you ever think about that? How little in Jesus' life was planned? I thought a lot about that. Almost all the stories of helping that are in the Gospels were unplanned and due to interruptions. And Jesus just flowed with the interruptions and turned them into unforgettable events. That says a lot to me because I live pretty much by plan and makes me wonder whether I should be more flexible. Here's another question. He fell at Jesus' feet. Now, what does that signify? Worship, real devotion, but even more for a ruler in front of everybody to fall on the ground before an itinerant preacher. What does that signify? This man has reached evidently the end of his ropes and is willing not to care about what anybody thinks. And I was thinking here about what would keep a ruler of a synagogue, maybe a denominational official or maybe a pastor, what would keep somebody from doing that? And I thought of two great barriers. One, Jesus is a controversial figure. A lot of people in his congregation, the Pharisees in his synagogue, wouldn't have been excited about this. He risked that. And another barrier might have been, it's a little bit unseemly for a well-dressed and noble man with a good reputation in the community to just kind of grovel at somebody's feet begging for help. And he didn't let that bother him at all. He fell down like a beggar, the same things beggars did when they came to Jesus. And we know from the rest of the passages that we've seen in Luke, Jesus just loves to help people like that. And so he's off and he's on his way. Now we skip down here to what happens next. The word comes in verse 49, your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore. Now, I thought that one statement is just full of implications. And I thought of implications about the Father, implications about the messenger, and implications about Jesus in that statement. And let's take those 1, 2, 3 like that and think about them for just a minute. Implications that this statement has about the Father. What does it say about the Father that the daughter died while he was away? How long had it been, you suppose? Well, it probably was not far. There's no indication here that it was like a day's journey. He was with his daughter. He was looking at her. Maybe he saw the breasts getting shorter and shorter. And he said, I'm going to get Jesus. Now, what do you think this messenger said when he said that? Take it, I assume this messenger is there's a bunch of people here who are attending. See, they're all around. There's the mom and the dad, and there's these friends. And I assume that this man who came is one of these group. What do you think they said to him when he said, I'm going to get Jesus right now? What are you going to leave this girl for? She's going to die while you're away. It's not going to do any good. You're just going to bother the teacher. I think that is very likely what is reflected in this phrase, don't trouble the teacher anymore. That little word in Greek means harass, bother, trouble. Do you think this man had that conception in his mind that what he was doing was harassing Jesus, troubling Jesus, bothering Jesus? The only reason you'd think that that was a bother to Jesus is if you didn't really think he was going to be of much use. So he had left her right, evidently, in the hour of her dying. And probably he said to himself, well, I may not get back in time to see my daughter alive, but at least I'll get back with Jesus. Probably just holding out hope against hope that at least I'll get back with Jesus. And who knows what Jesus might be able to do. So those are some implications about the Father. He really was willing to launch out against the advice of his friends and against the heart yearnings of his own love for his daughter and go to Jesus. Now, implications for this messenger and these friends down here who didn't have all that laudatory attitude towards Jesus. They had only seen the fetching of Jesus as a bother and a trouble. Now, you know what I thought of when I read that? I thought of a woman that I know very close to me. She's not in this town. An older woman who won't pray very much. And when she prays, it's sort of formal. Because she says, well, this is one of her quotes, why should I bother God with my problems? There's a lot more needy people in the world than me, and he should concern himself with them. What do you think of that attitude? Sounds kind of noble, doesn't it? It's like she's like a wife who's very solicitous of her harried executive husband. He's so burdened day after day, and some problem comes up in the family, and she says, well, I won't burden him with this. You get the picture of an executive with 10 phones ringing, and he's just about to pull his hair out because everything's going wrong. And she says, well, I'm not going to add to his burdens. You see what that implies about God? If a person says, well, I'm not going to pray to God, I'm not going to seek his help because he has so many other things to worry about. Is that a noble attitude? I think that is a terrible, terrible attitude to have towards God. Doesn't it imply that God is sort of overworked and his schedule has gotten out of hand and we need to be a little concerned about God? That's a belittling of God. One of the most glorious things about God is that he can handle 10 million phone lines at once. He does it every day. He's doing it right now. Have you ever thought what it's like for God to hear all the prayers of the Christians in the world at one time? My guess is there are 10 million people praying right now. Don't you think so? God's not the least bit under stress. Not the least. And for this woman to say, I can't add one more to that, is a belittling of God. But you know what I think's at the root? I think at the root is a deep desire not to be embarrassed by childlike reliance on somebody else. Don't bother Jesus means really, if we go out there and we, ask him to come, and suppose he doesn't come, or suppose she dies and he can't help him, or suppose, all worry about ourselves and how we'll appear. And therefore, what looks like a kind of noble solicitousness of God is really pride, deeply rooted in the human heart. So I think the implications of this statement for the messengers is that while they look like they're solicitous of Jesus, so don't trouble him anymore, they're really concerned about their own impressions. And then one last implications that this has for Jesus. Do not trouble the teacher anymore. That might say something about the messengers too, but Jesus had a reputation as a teacher. And I just couldn't help but think that Luke loved writing that word here, because the very next thing the teacher does, just the teacher, is raise the dead. And I can't help but think that Luke's saying, yeah, he's a teacher. And watch what power this teacher has. And as a teacher, it made me want to say, oh, Piper, don't ever be content just to impart intellectual information. Go for power. Go for life in your teaching, like this teacher did here. Okay, drop down now to verse 50. This beautiful word of Jesus in response to that news. Don't fear, only believe, and she will be well. Now, picture yourself here. I'll bet you've experienced something like this. How often have we ventured out in some act of obedience and sought Jesus or walking with him, and smash, some horrible thing happens to us. And we kind of look around and say, I went to Jesus. I was walking with Jesus. I had done right. And then this lousy news smashes into me like a freight train. I'll bet you this man, like many of us, when we run headlong into an obstacle, when we thought we were doing what was right, say, what have I done wrong? I went to get Jesus. I brought him and she died. What have I done wrong? And his faith starts to waver. Faith in the mercy of Jesus and grace. And what I love about the text is that Jesus not only expects or demands faith, he bolsters it. He ministers to it. He says, don't ask that kind of question. Don't fear. Don't let fear creep in. as though there's something you did wrong, as though you've lost her forever, as though seeking my help was futile, but rather believe, keep on believing, and she will be well. Isn't Jesus really saying, keep on troubling me? Don't you listen to what they say. You keep on troubling me. Don't shut me out like the Gerasenes and send me away. Come on, keep going with me. Don't give up on me. And that's what I say to all of you. You've all begun with Jesus. You're on the way. You've sought His help for some problem, and maybe yesterday or maybe it'll be tomorrow, something's going to smash you right in the face, and you're going to say, well, what good was it to go with Jesus? But when that happens, let this word come. Don't fear. It's never futile to go get Jesus. It always pays. And it would have paid for this man had he not raised her daughter, too, I think. So that's a beautiful word to us, I think, that we need to hear from Jesus to encourage us when we encounter disappointments while we're doing what we thought we were doing. And we're doing right. Now down to verse 52 and 53. She's not dead, but sleeping, Jesus says, and they laugh at him. Now, is she dead? You think? Is she dead? She's dead. She's dead. We know she's dead. They wouldn't make that mistake. We know she's dead because it says the Spirit returned to her, and that's a way of describing resuscitation of a dead person. And we know she's dead because in Matthew's account, the whole story is so telescoped together that she's dead from the very beginning. The man comes and says, my daughter's dead. She's dead. And Jesus says she's not dead, but she's sleeping. And what does he mean? What's he saying? Okay, I'm going to raise her, and since I can raise the dead, death is like sleep. Isn't this Jesus' way of saying in relationship to this daughter what he said in relationship to Lazarus much more explicitly? What did he say to Martha? I am the resurrection. Here he says, she's asleep when I'm here. Isn't that the point? When I'm in the presence of a dead person, they're only asleep. And so, I heard Marvin teach a few weeks ago from 1 Thessalonians 4:17, when it says, I don't want you to grieve because some of you have fallen asleep. Christians started talking like that. They just have fallen asleep. Ruth Fast is going to fall asleep one of these days. And the reason we can talk like that is because Jesus is here and is with us. And he turns death from the absolute end into just a nap until the resurrection. And they laughed at him. Now, I learned from this laughter a lesson. You know the lesson I learned? This lesson. When Jesus' words look patently false, think again. There are so many critics of the Bible who are they shoot from the hip. They got hair triggers. They see something that looks a little perplexing and whammo, it's a mistake, or it's crazy, or it doesn't fit. Just like these people, the first reaction they have when he says something that they know is false on the surface, they just start laughing. The lesson is never laugh at Jesus. Never laugh at the word of Jesus. Always let the word of Jesus call you into question. Don't you call him into question. Back off and say, I know she's dead. He says she's not dead. And then ask, what does this mean? And when you do that kind of thing with the Bible, your roots go down deep. I wrote an article for the Standard that'll be out in May, I think. It's called Brothers, Query the Text. And you know what I admonish pastors to do? Look for contradictions. Because If you will sit and think for an hour about an apparent contradiction, you'll learn more than 10 hours of just quick reading of the text. And that's a lesson we ought to learn about every time Jesus says something perplexing. Don't laugh at him. Stop and ponder. Let's go back up to this woman with the flow of blood. Jesus was touched from behind. Power went out from him. The hemorrhage stopped. This must have been an awful disease that she could know it stopped. It was no doubt connected with some kind of irregular menstrual flow. 12 years of misery like that. In that day, that must have been horrible for a woman. It stopped. And she's healed. Now, Jesus doesn't just keep on going. He stops and says, "Who touched me?" And they all deny it. And he insists, "Somebody touched me. Power went out from me." And then she admitted it. Now, why do you suppose Jesus stopped like that? Jesus does not want to be known as a magical healer who came into the world to kind of let strange magical powers ooze out from him this way and that. Jesus came to meet people one-on-one and help them one-on-one. And he stops because he doesn't want this woman to get the wrong impression. Faith means a personal union. And so he wants to meet this woman face to face, because I think when he sent her away saying, "Daughter, your faith has made you well," this little word here, "made you well," means has saved you. I think that's more than healed you. Now that we have had this conversation, now that we have connected one-on-one, now you can go away and be content that you have been made whole. What a mixture of emotions must have been here. Picture this. The woman touches him and is healed. Joy. Next thing that happens, "Who touched me?" What happens to her joy? What is the emotion that arises then? Fear. Why? Well, maybe she thinks, "I shouldn't have done it. I should have been open with this like the other people have been open and fallen down before him and asked for his help." Whatever the reason, she's afraid. Now, there's something beautiful here that Jesus does. I'm going to create a new story for you that I could imagine being written in the gospel that didn't happen, and I'm glad it didn't. Suppose this is what happened. She comes up behind him, she touches him, she's healed, she's joyful. Jesus turns and says, "Who touched me?" She denies it like she did with everybody else, and he says, "Oh, I thought somebody had been healed." Starts walking, and the blood starts flowing again. And she says, "Jesus, it was me. Help me, please. It was me." And he turns and he says, "I did help you. And you didn't trust my grace enough to answer my question. Now go and learn the lesson of ingratitude." I could imagine that being written in the gospel. But what does he do? She lied. Isn't that amazing? She gets helped by Jesus, and what's her first response to help? She lies. They all denied it, he says. "Who touched me?" They all denied it. She lied. Now that's enough to get some criticism from Jesus. And what does Jesus do? He doesn't turn and just say, "Oh, I thought somebody was healed." He says, "No, there's somebody here. And I'm going to wait until they show up." And then she's at her end, and she knows she's uncovered, and she comes. And in the presence of all, she says why. He got her into the open. He got her to be willing to humble herself like Jairus and fall before him. And then he says, "Woman, it's faith that heals." And next time when I ask you a question, trust me. Don't be afraid of me. Now, go in peace, not in anxiety. Go in peace.
This is Light and Truth, God-centered preaching to help you see Christ clearly and treasure Him truly. I'm your host, Dan Cruver. Thank you for listening. On our next episode, John Piper begins a 9-part series titled Free from Condemnation. I hope you'll join us. For more resources, visit desiringgod.org.